Today, I'll start with a quote from Oscar-winning actor Brad Pitt. A family is a risky venture because the greater the love, the greater the loss. That's the trade-off. But I'll take it all. Unbelievably, the topic of the family has become a highly controversial subject today. The truth is that the family unit has never been more important than it is right now. That's what we're going to talk about on today's episode. Welcome to the Coleman Nation. Let's go. Today's content, by the way, comes from a book I'm working on, which will be released soon, called The Goal of a Nation. This book puts forth a vision of what an ideal nation would look like 300 years into the future. It will be released sometime this year, so keep an eye out for it. We're working on it right now, just going through some final edits. It's actually pretty exciting. But I want you to keep that in mind as a context for this whole episode, is that the whole thing is, really what does civilization look like 300 years from now? So it has been said that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, but what parts would make up a strong and integral whole? I believe that the first part we must define is the building block of a strong society. Projecting out over the next 300 years, I believe that the building block that we need to be talking about is the family unit. The family unit has been attacked from various quarters throughout history because a truly strong family doesn't require much reliance on a government or other individuals or other families. The importance of the rest of society decreases to the extent that a family can care for itself and grow and prosper within its own self-contained structure. When the family unit becomes strong, it is very powerful. Going back hundreds of years and in many parts of the world today, this unit can exist and thrive self-sufficiently in any environment, from the Australian outback to the African jungles to the Himalayan mountains and deep within the Amazon. A strong family unit is the most robust and natural building block most societies utilize. Now, what are the building blocks within a family? The traditional nuclear family, which is defined as parents and their children living in a single residence, consists of a mother, a father, and children, which are the basic building blocks, and can be extended to include grandparents. With these components, the family would possess wisdom, strength, and virility in the adults, and hope for the future in the children. Through tribal knowledge, the family can create a great deal of momentum for the growth of a society. Today, there is considerable controversy about the traditional picture of the man as the head of the household and the woman as subservient. We often see these roles being switched around, where the man stays home and raises the children and the woman takes the head of the family role. Does this mean the basic family structure is outdated in today's society? I would answer no. I believe that basic structure is vital for the trajectory of civilization's long-term survival. I just think it needs to be more clearly defined. Regardless of who in the family fills a particular role, each role must be defined to analyze its strengths and weaknesses, as well as whether it can withstand the pressures of modern society. These definitions do not need to be based on the patriarchal or anti-feminist paradigm of, let's say, the Brady Bunch, the 70s popular sitcom about a combined family. Let's just examine the basic roles. How can we assist them? And how can society help a family be stronger with each of them? To examine the various roles in the family, let's look back at more primitive times when the family had to deal with multiple challenges, such as the elements and wild animals. A family would have 10 children because they knew that 5 of them probably wouldn't survive. It was a whole different picture without today's modern amenities. So examining a family in this light reduces it to its lowest common denominators. We can then compare each attribute and quality of a family member and analyze whether they are still relevant in today's modern family unit paradigm. Again, I'm not saying who in the family should carry which role. I'm just saying, we need to examine each role on its own. So let's look at the father. What was the fundamental role of the father in past times? It was the protection of the family. The father generally provided food, shelter, and security. Being the physically strongest member, the father generally provided most of the building and manual labor, later assisted by the children. The role of the mother has been to provide nurturing and care in the home. It has traditionally been the mother's responsibility to plan for the family based on the seasonal cycles. It was up to her to ensure enough food was prepared and stored to keep the family fed. The mother usually took care of the children's day-to-day needs. This included caring for their health, ensuring they were well fed, and providing them with an education. In my opinion, no CEO or president's role is more vital than a mother's. No position in corporate America trumps a mother raising children for the future. Does that mean she cannot perform roles of both mother and a corporate position? No, of course not. I know some women who are champions at both. Grandparents are often ignored when considering familial roles. Their role is to pass on the wisdom they have gained to the next 2 generations and to their grandchildren. What then is the role of children? The role of children is hope for the future. We see in our children's futures what we didn't see for ourselves. You know that you will probably never walk on Mars personally, but your children or even grandchildren most likely will. Hope keeps society moving forward, and that hope requires children who can dream big without boundaries. Children have a critical role in society, which in all honesty has been diminished. In olden times, children were expected to assist with household tasks. They were an extra set of hands for tasks and chores that needed to be done to ensure the household's survival. Children also played a crucial role in the transmission of tribal knowledge. Every generation took the knowledge of its parents and passed it along to the next, adding its new efficiencies and experiences. Another function of children has been to enhance the survival of their parents and grandparents, something that isn't happening in today's breakdown of the family unit. If, for example, you have 10 children, the likelihood of your survival into the future is very high. At least one of your 10 children will probably be very successful and will be able to take care of you in your later years. Mathematically speaking, the more children you have, the better your chances for a great retirement. Now, I took the subject of abortion up in a recent episode, but I don't think it can be stressed enough, and certainly it applies here. Since the United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022, the activity of bringing children into the world and of motherhood has become somewhat maligned. Society has become structured in a way that opposes building a family. As an example, major corporations such as Google and Amazon provide employee support for abortions. A moment ago, I talked about the fact that the mother's job is the most important in society, and today it is not seen that way, especially from the perspective of big corporations. The degradation of the mother's role in society goes back to an ideology planted in the American psyche during the Second Industrial Revolution, championed by Standard Oil founder John D. Rockefeller and other industry barons. This ideology asserted that women needed to work in order to provide value, but in reality, it was a thinly veiled strategy for obtaining cheap labor. This line of thought was a significant contributor to the view that caring for the home is of no value, as women's pursuit of having families affects the bottom line of many companies. To survive the next 300 years, we must restore the importance of the mother's role in the household to have a truly thriving society. If the current trend of free-for-all pregnancy termination continues, it will bring us to the point of significant population problems and the elimination beforehand of some incredible benefits to society. If you look at an average rate of population growth where the great majority of children are allowed to be born and not eliminated, you know that some will turn out to be fairly mundane, some will be drags on the welfare system, and some will be absolute geniuses who will make incredible contributions to our nation and the world. Since Planned Parenthood was established, it has been responsible for 63 million abortions over the last 50 years. How many of those 63 million would have been Elon Musk's? How many of those 63 million would have been the next Thomas Edison? How many of those 63 million would have been the next Martin Luther King? How many of those 63 million would have been the next Charlie Kirk? We have to look at this and especially note that the majority of abortions have been African American. Stories abound of people who had decided to get abortions but then decided not to, and their children turned out to make major scientific or other contributions to our civilization. We should be very concerned about this trend. It isn't a matter of cost or that these people being born will be a waste of space or that society can't take care of them. If you were to draw the trajectory of a prosperous and wonderful nation from where we are today to where we'd like to be 300 years from now, it would not include the destruction of the human family. Now, let's discuss the relationship between children and their parents. Should children always love their parents? What should such a relationship consist of? On this point, we can take an interesting quote right from the Bible, specifically from the book of Exodus. Honor thy mother and thy father. Take careful note that this quote does not say, love thy mother and thy father. It makes particular use of the word honor. According to other references, it is the parent's job to love and help children. But nowhere does it say that children should necessarily love their parents, nor will they. There are plenty of times where I did not particularly love my parents, especially when growing up. But looking back at the guidance, example, and discipline that they provided, it put me in a much stronger position to survive as an adult. It is the parent's job to love and help their children grow into responsible adults, and there will be times when this relationship is tough. Throughout it all, and at the end of the day, the children should honor and respect their parents. Such a relationship cannot ever be replaced by government or social structures, such as that put forth in Marxism, in which the state raises children and there is no family unit. Examine the results of such systems when put into place. Just in the US alone, look at children who end up in social services, quote unquote, the system. How many of these children end up as criminals or drug addicts? An essential part of raising children, and one that is correctly given high emphasis in our societies, is education. How could education be defined? One way would be to install the correct operating system within children, enabling them to function independently and with strength in pursuing their goals. It means ensuring they are valuable to society. The result of education should be competence and ability. Let me say that again. The result of education should be competence and ability. This is certainly not true at present. The constantly rising tide of complaints today about the quality of education is very valid, as children are graduating from high school with reading and application levels comparable to those of elementary school or worse. The history of education is another critical topic I've covered more than once, but it, like the topic of abortion, cannot have enough importance placed upon it. In another episode, I talked about a book I read as a teenager called The Leipzig Connection. It's about the Western movement of psychology and how it eventually led to the formation of our current educational model. It may surprise you to learn that before 1874, the word psychology had a different meaning than it does today. You can still look in the dictionary and find that the word psyche means soul or spirit, and the suffix ology means study of. If you guessed that the original definition of psychology was the study of the soul, you would be correct. But in 1874, Professor Wilhelm Wundt of Leipzig University in Germany abruptly and radically altered this definition. Professor Wundt asserted that humans had no soul, that they were assemblages of chemicals and stimulus response animals. This is the basic fundamental upon which the entirety of today's psychology is built. During this period, multimillionaire John D. Rockefeller, founder of Standard Oil, sought to invest his considerable fortune in something that would provide an income tax shelter and support his enterprises. He also, as an aside, was extremely vengeful against the US government for breaking up the monopoly that was Standard Oil. So he charged his son, John Rockefeller Jr., with finding a worthwhile investment that would ultimately result in many tax benefits for himself personally. At the same time, American psychologists and educators, Edward Thorndike and John Dewey, were promoting Wilhelm Wundt's theories that humans are animals that can never improve. Rockefeller Jr. proposed to his father that if humans believed they were animals and could not improve, they could be controlled as cheap labor in Rockefeller's factories and oil fields. Rockefeller agreed and invested millions of dollars into educational schemes that utilized these theories. This investment created an absolute firestorm in the educational field. Several professors at Teachers College at Columbia University, which, by the way, is still as jacked up today as it was over 100 years ago, right? Several of the professors at Teachers College at Columbia University set out to implement these new radical theories in teaching. One of these professors, psychologist Edward Thorndike, proposed that all students everywhere be provided with the same textbook for a given subject. Anyone who could not read the textbook would be considered substandard, while those who could read it would be regarded as intelligent. Thorndike also said that the definitions of words don't matter. So can you imagine how insane this is? That you just give everyone the same textbook, and if you couldn't read it, right? And so who wouldn't be able to read, or who would have a low literacy level? Farmers, people that didn't focus on education during that period of time. Who would have a tremendous strength in education? The kids that were raised, in wealthier families. And this automatically created a divide that was just falsely created by Thorndike as being able to file people as intelligent or not intelligent, paying no attention into the fact that they had not been taught or indoctrinated into, various educational systems prior to that point. So Thorndike proposed that human intelligence is defined by genetic makeup. As a result, there are the stupid kids and there are the smart kids. And that's the way it is. Nobody, by his theories, can ever become more intelligent or better than they already are. They can never improve. The smart kids, of which there were relatively few, could go on to be executives and run companies, while those of lesser intelligence would be relegated to factories and labor forces. This is the basic education model that has carried forward into modern times. Given its foundation in such treachery, our education system needs to be entirely uprooted and reformed. Another factor of education is funding. I was once part of a debate regarding the acceptance of government funding by private schools. My team won the debate by arguing that once a school accepts such funding, it is forever accountable to the government, which will dictate the school's educational direction. Public education is funded and controlled by the government, and it's done in such a way that the students can never win. Funding is provided to specific schools for various reasons, according to state regulations. In California, funding is allocated based on the number of students in attendance. In no case is attention paid to the results the school is turning out, children who can barely read or write. However, the school or school district continues to receive payment anyway. In fact, as a child, I used to find it strange that truant officers were running around to ensure that children were attending school. Thinking about it now, it makes sense since the school is only compensated for attendance, not results. It's a small amount to invest in hiring a truant officer to ensure attendance if that attendance will bring in exorbitant amounts of revenue for the school. I propose that school funding should follow the child. If a particular school obtains spectacular results, more parents will want to send their children there. On the other hand, if their school is not educating their children effectively, they could consider pulling them out and sending them to a school that is achieving good results. Funding wouldn't only be given to schools with high enrollment and attendance rates, it would also have to be given to those that are achieving the best quantifiable results with those students. Children are the future of our society, and quality education based on quantifiable results would be very beneficial for its stability and long-term growth. As children grow, it's essential to help them discover meaningful purposes for their lives. People without a purpose tend to fall into criminality or other destructive behaviors, so assisting children in finding a constructive purpose is vitally important. Note that they often already have one, and you just need to encourage it and let them get on with it. But if they don't, help them find it. Helping a child find a purpose often goes hand in hand with helping them discover a career. I recommend taking a child when they're 12 years old and discovering where their interests lie. I also think that something that's incredibly important would be homeschooling, because I don't think that there's any better guide or mentor in that area than to actually have parents be tremendously involved in the guidance of their children into valuable members of society. But note that their interests can change and ultimately lead to a completely different outcome than where they started. I'm certainly a great example of that. You know, it's good that my parents were patient and allowed me to find my own way. When I was initially asked the question that all kids are asked at some point, what do you want to be when you grow up? My first answer was that I wanted to be a musician. I was part of a group of friends that played 80s cover songs. It was super fun, so I wanted to have music lessons. To pay for them, I worked in a chiropractor's office answering phones. Observing the work in the chiropractor's office led me to consider a second career option of being a chiropractor. I thought it would be a great backup career if being a famous rock star didn't pan out. I got to be about 14 or 15 though, and I changed my mind. Chiropractic started to seem repetitive and mundane, not to offend any chiropractors, but I enjoyed seeing people and helping them, and chiropractic seemed like something that I could do, but didn't hold the excitement that I wanted. So at age 15, I became inspired to pursue a career in politics. At the time, my grandfather was the governor of American Samoa. I called him up to talk to him about it, you know, as what he was doing seemed to be very interesting to me. When I told my grandfather I was considering a political career, he was quite excited. He said, great, right? He goes, I can get you into Georgetown University because that's my alma mater. And I said, wait a second, why would I possibly want to go to Georgetown? And he said, because the natural runway into politics is to attend law school and become an attorney. You then have the basic knowledge that will enable you to go into public office. And I said, but I don't want to be an attorney. I want nothing to do with the law, right? There's no way on earth I'm going to be a lawyer. There was a bit of silence. Then my grandfather asked me, grandson, what do you think I do exactly? To which I replied, you go to parties and hang out with cool people. I'd like to do that as a job. I heard an audible sigh from the other end of the phone as my grandfather realized I had no idea what he actually did. Needless to say, my political aspirations were short-lived. My grandfather loved me and probably thought it was pretty funny, to be honest with you. But, you know, over the years, he did wind up taking me to the Republican National Convention and even introduced me to Dan Quayle. But at the end of the day, I didn't really get it. So currently, politics has a different meaning to me. We need to take responsibility for our local policies, contribute to our legislation and government structures, and be able to build a society that we really want. That's a realization I've only had in the last decade or so. It could be very fulfilling, especially if you're making real change to a society that will prosper and really do well. I'm going to do a separate part 2 on this episode dealing specifically with children. I'll end part 1 by asking this. What is your opinion about the family unit? Do you see it as a valuable building block to society, or do you consider it to be another antiquated machine left over from an earlier day and age? Your opinions are important to me, so please don't hesitate to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, please like it and subscribe so you know when new episodes are posted. Click the bell to be notified of new episodes. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the Coleman Nation. Take care.